Hello, and welcome to Brian Breaks Character. I'm so glad that you're here today. I'm really excited, delighted, mind blown by the guest that we had on today's episode. So, Jessica Blank is like a furnace of creative energy, and her output is incredible. She coaches other content creators, writers, script writers, show directors, showrunners, as well as putting out her own content everywhere. She's got a bunch of development deals going on in Hollywood right now. She's working on something at the Public Theater. And one of the things she said in this interview, she said to me, I don't believe in talent. I think it can all be taught. And it is such an empowering and humble thought that I wanted to share that with you before we jump in. And if that feels confronting to you, great. Please lean in, because Jessica has such a brilliant way of explaining how we can use our own gifts once we kind of have some pragmatic tools. So Jessica is a writer, director, and an actor. You might know her from as the loudmouth big sister from CBS's Made in Jersey. She's been on a bunch of things on TV, HBO's High Maintenance, Blue Bloods. You can all go to IMDb and look it up for yourselves if you want to. I know if you're listening to this podcast, you definitely know how to use IMDb. But the reason why I had her on the podcast is because she's a story strategist and a coach, and she helps people to create their content. And I mean, she doesn't just help people, like she teaches at some of the best places in the country: Brown, Stanford, NYU, Juilliard, Northwestern. Hey, go Cats. That's where I went to school. And she and her husband, Eric Jensen, wrote the play, The Exonerated. Now, I'm sure you heard about this play. It won an award. It won the awards and was recognized by Lucille Lortel, Outer Critics Circle, Drama Desk, Ovation, was named the best play of the year by the New York Times. And all this before it was made into an award-winning TV movie starring Susan Sarandon and Danny Glover. So she and her husband's plays have been seen around the world at big places like Center Theater Group, Public Theater, Steppenwolf. So you probably can figure out why I was like, I need to, if she will deign to come on my podcast. I was begging her to come. It was a very easy yes. I say begging because I wanted her to come on so bad, because she works with people, whether they're like hobbyists who want to try to go professional as artists, or people who are big names. So like I said, showrunners, TV directors, film directors. And this conversation today, what I loved about it is Jessica brings all of her fierce intelligence to this conversation. You can tell that she works with people one-on-one in very deep ways, and she also works in a class. She shares all of that process with us. So if you are someone who is listening and you've ever thought about creating content, you've ever been like daunted to create content, or you've thought, I'm not good enough to create content, Jessica's empowering approach to this will leave you pretty fired up today. Before we jump into the episode, because she explains all this way better than I do, I want to ask you for a huge favor. Would you mind sending this episode or just sharing this podcast with 3 of your friends? We work really hard over here to put out valuable content to support actors and creatives, and I want to make sure that it gets in the hands of the people that actually need it the most. So grab the link of this episode of this podcast, text it to 3 friends, or you can just click the share button wherever you're listening to this right now and send it that way, whatever works for you. But I would be forever grateful. Okay, so I just want to put that out there. All right, let's get into this. So Jessica, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad that you're here. So Jessica, I kind of want to jump right in.
Sure.
Because I think a lot of our listeners are thinking about, oh my gosh, she's had this incredible career as an actor and as a writer. How does she think about the two? And I think I'd love to start there. Can you start us there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started as an actor, like most young people who go into this kind of storytelling at all. Like acting is the thing that you have available to you when you're in high school or whatever. So like that's the entry point. But I also really passionately fell in love with acting. And I got into a BFA program, a good one, but my parents were very encouraging of me going to a liberal arts school. They were like, you also are going to do other things. And I was like, no, all I care about is acting. That's the only thing that matters. And they were like, we will pay for it if you really insist, but we really think you're also going to do other things. And so I went to a liberal arts school. I designed my own interdisciplinary major. Surprise. I was studying acting and writing and then the politics of both. And then I came to New York to train as an actor. And I studied with Bill Esper. I trained in Meisner in a 2-year program. And this summer, I always wrote, but I wrote poetry, right? It was like really not, it was like a separate track, right? I was a slam poet for a little while. I had the acting over here and then I had the writing over here. And I was like, I wish that I could write plays or screenplays but like I couldn't imagine how to do it. Like it didn't come naturally to me. I didn't have ideas for that kind of stuff. So I was like, okay, maybe they're just two separate tracks. And that was like back in the day at the very tail end of the 20th century, like the last months of the 20th century, when like the idea was that you had to choose, like if you were a serious artist, you had to like choose a thing and devote yourself.
And if you let anyone
that.
know that you, and I also feel like there was the myth you tell me, if you said you did both, we trusted you less in both areas.
100%. Like you were a dilettante, you weren't serious, whatever. And people would be like, what are you? Right. So I was like, I am an actor and I can write always. Like nobody has to hire me to write. Like I can just write. So I'll just do that and not tell people that I do it. And, partway through my first year of acting school, I met my now husband, who had been in New York being an actor professionally for 10 years. And he was actually kind of the same thing. Like he had a band, they had a record deal with Sony. He like made his money doing illustrations for High Times magazine, but like he was a serious actor and that was his main deal. Right. So we got about a month after we started dating. This is a whole story in and of itself, but we got the idea for our first play, which was a documentary play based on interviews that we did with death row exonerees. And we literally
wait, that's a big jump. How did you jump from, I kind of do poems and you kind of run a rock band and drawing pictures for High Times. Let's go interview people and make a play.
Fair. So I'll tell a little bit about the story. So I've always been a really politically oriented person and an activist. And so I was doing activism around, like my day job was actually doing organizing and activism around the criminal justice system. At that time. And so I was going to a conference at Columbia about the death penalty. And I asked Eric if he wanted to come with me. And we'd been on like 5 dates. He likes to say that it was like,
he's like, sounds like a great date.
Totally. He likes to say it was early enough in our relationship that he would still say yes to anything I asked him to do. And so he came with me and we were at a workshop at that conference on a group of cases called the Death Row 10, which were all guys in Chicago who had had confessions tortured out of them by a particular police commander who was found to have done that and fired. He was later prosecuted. But some of these guys were still sitting in prison, many of them with no other evidence against them besides these quote unquote confessions, some of them on death row. So we heard a lecture about the cases and we saw some like 60 Minutes type documentary footage and it was all very disturbing, but like really on an intellectual level. But then the organizers had set up a phone call from one of the guys in prison and they hooked the phone up to a speaker so that for a few minutes he was talking to us in the room and telling us his story. And it was only a few minutes before the authorities got wise to what was happening and cut the call off. But by the end of the call, everyone in the room was crying. Right. It was like a totally different experience than like the hour and a half of like lecture and facts and whatever we had just learned. And Eric, being like, an outsider to this scene, was also crying and totally moved, but like looked around the room and he was like, yeah, but like, this is bullshit. Like we're at a death penalty conference. Like everybody here already cares. These are not the people that need to be having this experience. And I agreed. And so we started writing notes back and forth to each other, like literally in the back of the classroom. We were like in a law school classroom about like, how do you get around this problem of preaching to the choir? And we were both, storytellers, right? And we were both interested in documentary theater, which at that point was like a really emerging medium. I was a big Anna Deavere Smith nerd and he had been like, I think the reader for Moises Kaufman as he was auditioning for the Oscar Wilde piece, like he had been involved in the development of that somehow. And they were, Moises and Tectonic at that point were writing the Laramie Project. It hadn't opened yet, but like Eric knew about it. And so we got the idea in that conversation on paper to write a documentary play, to travel around the country and interview death row exonerees and make a play from the interview transcripts. And we literally thought we would do it downtown in some off-Broadway theater for like 99 of our friends for like a week or something, right? Like it was like not a career move. It was like we taught ourselves
right.
to write a play so that we could write that play about that subject. And as soon as we got on the road and started interviewing people, we were like, oh my God, like these people are trusting us with their stories. This is huge. And we devoted our lives to that project for like completely for like 5 years, probably. It wound up having a very long life and like running off Broadway with, for 2 years with Richard Dreyfuss and Gabriel Byrne and, all of Danny Glover, like all of these extraordinary actors, and being made into a movie. And we wrote a book about it. And we emerged from that. I mean, truthfully, it felt like that project wanted to exist in the world, and it like grabbed us by the scruff of our necks and like used us for 5 years in order to
I
like
love that.
exist. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And we learned how to do it by doing it. And so at the end of those 5 years, we kind of like looked at each other and we were like, okay, I guess we're writers now. And like, we're also married.
Was that disorient? So when you were doing this, I want to get in here a little bit, and I know I want to talk about so many things. So I want to make sure we don't spend all our time here, because I totally could. But was it disorienting for you, the also actor, to say, okay, every time you'd like pull out your notebook, you're like, I guess I'm still writing? Were you having that conversation continuously with yourself? Was there a certain point you said, I'm giving in, this is the project we're on? Like, how did that balance work for you?
Yeah, I didn't feel torn myself in my own work. I was still training as an actor at the studio. I finished my second year while we went on the road and did the interviews during the summer. And then as the life of the play was happening, I did my second year at the studio. I got an agent, I got a manager. I was auditioning during that same period of time. So I was still, and Eric was working as an actor. I mean, we were funding ourselves through working.
Yeah.
At that point, also you could do commercials and like support your theater career. So
yes.
that was a thing too. We were both, Law and Orders were in New York. There was some TV production in New York already. So we were both still acting, and I didn't have an inner conflict about it. The issue was with other people. And also because the play, sort of surprisingly to us, had a lot of really big success really quickly and like attracted a lot of high profile people, while I was really just starting as an actor. Like nobody knew me yet as an actor in New York. So I felt like I had to assert, like, I'm really here to be an actor. Right. Even though I'm doing this project, I'm totally devoted to. But in terms of like my career long term, like I'm here to be an actor. That's what I am.
Got it. Right. Yeah. Totally hear it. It. I think a lot of the people listening to this podcast are creators who are challenged by the idea of doing more than one thing, or that they feel like they're cheating on one thing if they do the other thing. So I think it's a great model to hear how you would wrestle with this and how you weren't wrestling with it at other times as you're going through this. For everyone to hear that it's totally, it's like you just have to put your stake out there and say, I'm doing this, I'm doing like one small action after another small action. But I would love, carry on, please.
Yeah. I mean, well, to me, it's like, it really is all one thing. Like now, I mean, there's more story there, and we can tell that story if you're interested in it. But like now I write television, I write and direct movies, I direct all of our plays. We still make documentary theater. We just got a commission from the public for a musical. So that's a huge thing. Yeah, totally. To write the book and collaborate on the lyrics. And I still act. And to me, it's completely, they're all parts of the same thing. It's all storytelling. It's the same art form, but it's from different entry points. Right. And each entry point requires its own skill set. Right. I'm not saying that like being a director is the same as being an actor, or if you know how to write, you can automatically act or anything like that. But they're all part of the same big picture.
Yeah. So when someone comes to work with you, and I want to even connect this dots to the students that you coach at Juilliard, or that you work with at Juilliard as well, and how you teach there. They're coming at you at all different stages of the writing process, right? They're coming to you like, I've never written anything before in my entire life. They're coming like, I'm an actor who also wants to. Talk a little bit about that work that you do, because I think the container you create is incredibly powerful for those people.
Yeah. So I work with people who are making their own projects. I used to work as like a sort of I would call it like a high level story coach, or like an extra magical story coach.
Okay.
Right. Like I would help people,
like fairy godmother coming in and fixing things
but like,
up kind of
but I would help people I would midwife people's scripts, people's projects,
Right.
right? But the work was like just that, right? Like just let me help you make your project and make it awesome. No matter what level you are, again, like you said, like whether you're an actor that's never written before, whether you're a showrunner with a show on the air, and like anything in between, right? Psychoanalyst with an idea for a script, like, great, let's go, right?
Yes.
Yes. And I realized several months ago that I always, at all times, I always had a few clients that I would wind up like going way over time with. And it would feel like we had so much more to talk about than like just the work itself. Like we would be talking about the work, but they were in the midst of some big career up level, or like the project was a vehicle for something larger in their life as an artist. And so we would wind up talking about like, well, how are you going to get on the market? How are you going to get this produced? Like what's involved in that, right? And like what place does this project live in your overall mission and vision of yourself as an artist, right?
Right.
So I shifted my coaching practice several months ago. Once I started noticing that, I was like, oh, those are the people I can serve the best, right? Like the folks I can serve the best, again, whether they're like advanced writers or beginners or anywhere in between, people who have decided that they are professional artists, right? That like, this is their career path. This is their life. It's not like a fun project that they're doing on the side. That's cool. Not to belittle that at all. It's just like, there are other people that can serve those folks better than I can, I think. And this project is like, whatever the script is the vehicle for some kind of transformational shift in your artistic life, right? So like I'm like working with a fairly well-known actress who wants to become a director, right? Okay. And, like I'm working with a TV writer who lives outside of LA and has been taking classes and writing scripts forever. And she's like a badass and she's really good. And she wants to get her portfolio in shape to like move to LA and do the thing. I'm working with another actress who wants to become a screenwriter, and like she's going to finish her script with me. Right. So, and so the work is about the project itself. It's about what does this mean in your life as an actor? And it's also about how do we deal with the nuts and bolts of like getting this shit made and out there in the world.
Yeah, but there's so much in what you just said. I think it's so powerful what you're doing for people, but I want to go back to a couple of things you said. One is people who consider themselves a professional artist, period, end of story. At that point, you're ready to do this kind of work. That's what I'm hearing most loud.
Yes.
Like, I have a mission. It exists in many different places. It exists in a musical, in a documentary theater, it exists as a film, it exists as me directing, it exists as me acting. It doesn't have to be all those things, but like what you're saying is there's something I'm wanting to say. And then the other thing that you said, I'm curious though, actually, let me interrupt myself here. Do you find yourself saying the same thing to some of these people no matter what level that they're at?
Well, yes, in different ways.
You find yourself, yes, go for it. Can you share a little?
In different ways, absolutely. Everyone's different. Everybody has their own unique process. There is no, like, as far as process goes, I think it's really important actually for creators to understand that there's like no one right way to do it, right? You want to write at 6 a.m. before you go to the gym, or like you want to stay up until 2 a.m. and do it at the end of everything, or you want to do it like at a different time fine. Like as long as you're doing the thing, like do it. It doesn't matter. Like there's not a right answer process wise. In terms of principles, yes, like there is, I mean, I could really nerd out on this. Like can
you nerd out on one for me?
Well, I have a story methodology, right? So like the way I teach story structure is a pre-existing thing, right? So we understand, so when you're working with story, and this is why like acting, directing, screenwriting, playwriting, they're all part of the same thing, right? You're working with sacred geometry, right? And that's true of any art form. We understand that intuitively with music, right? Like culturally, we know that all music is based on like a set of mathematical patterns, scales, chords, etc., that like are pre-existing, and that anybody who's writing music is like playing with a set of structures that already exist, right? We understand it with visual art, right? Like we get like composition is a thing, like color theory and the relationship of colors to each other. Like that's a pre-existing thing. And if you're making paintings, right, you're dealing with that. When it comes to storytelling, I mean, we don't like, we don't understand that culturally at all. Like there's no shorthand for it. And so we think, and storytelling also is so magical because what it does in our brains is it puts us in the shoes of another person. It transforms us. It takes us into a different world, and we experience that as a magical thing. So there's this like mystique around storytelling that we have. And so then we jump to, well, that person is really good at acting or at writing or whatever. They must be talented, right? I don't believe in talent. I don't think it's a thing.
Say more. Say more.
I don't believe it exists. I believe, so look, some people have the drive and desire to devote their lives to an art form. And that's something that like you either have or you don't. And it's fine if you don't have it. Like you probably have that drive and desire in some other area, right? But if you have the drive and desire, everything that's involved in storytelling is a set of techniques and skills that can be learned. It's all craft, right?
So wait, stop. Don't go so fast. Talk everybody hear what Jessica just said one more time. It is all something that can be learned. So before, I really want everyone to listen here. Before you're deciding, Jessica works with special magical cherubs and elves that exist in the world and I can't do this, because I really want you to hear that piece of Jessica, who has worked with hundreds of people, let's say thousands of people at all different levels, has seen the person who thought that get past that by being taught the skills to do it. I think that's such a powerful thing to just make sure we underline that there, Jessica.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I've seen it with all of these students and all of these clients, and it also happened to me. Like I wrote a gigantic hit with my husband, off-Broadway play that ran for 2 years, and like neither one of us knew how to do that when we started doing it. Yeah.
Like you're writing poetry before that, right?
Yeah.
Right.
We learned how to do it by doing it and by seeing what worked and what didn't and paying attention and like building on the things that worked and taking away the things that didn't, right? And getting feedback and all of that. But yes, it's all craft. And so storytelling is also based in sacred geometry. It has a pre-existing set of principles and structures, right? So if you look at Aristotle's Poetics, if you look at Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey, right? If you look at 3-act Hollywood screenplay structure, and if you look at now, because we have MRI technology, we know what story does in the brain. You look at what those structures do in the brain, it all matches. It's all the same thing, right? So like there is an underlying form that can be learned by anybody. And then you put your own unique, individualized, highly specific sensibility, vulnerability, courage, voice, set of interests, worlds you want to be in, whatever, imagination into that. And that's what makes it yours, right? So I'm not talking about like formulas or like you have to learn this mathematical pattern for writing a screenplay and then it'll sell to Hollywood. Like I don't buy into that stuff. But there are much more elegant, basic structures that our brains are actually wired to respond to in certain ways. And if you learn to play with that, you can learn to tell a story that is going to take an audience on a ride, that's going to move them. And it's not because you're talented, it's because you're learning a craft. And I also am a big believer that when you master craft and you come to it with courage, the art just shows up. Right. So like I would compare it to like if in nature, right, if you have the structure, if the structure of a cell is correct, right, life force enters it. Right. It's not something you don't have to like work on the life force. Right. It's just there. Right. You have to create the conditions where that life force can enter.
That is really great. I mean, what I love about what you're saying here, and what's resonating for me, Jessica, is also this idea. It's not a formula. It's not a 1, 2, 3. There is some 1, 2, 3 about it, but the way that you were working with your clients and the way you're working with the people that you're coaching on this and writers and the way is that there's a more freedom in the way that you're describing it. So I may understand that structure. I may know that structure exists, but when I get into the throes of sitting there at 6 a.m., if that's when I like to write, or 2 a.m., if that's when I like to write, I'm able to actually get some work done in this is not the right word, but I would say melodic way, or in harmony kind of way. And then I get to come to Jessica and like, can we sort out, is this actually going to do what I want it to do? Or like, so you can be a little more free then let me follow the I don't know if you ascribe to this book or not, or Who Killed the Cat or whatever that book is, right? Like that
Save
kind
the
of
Cat.
like, is it Who Saved the Cat, which people love that book, right? But is that, and it's not, I'm not saying that what you're saying is in deference to, no, it can't be, those don't also exist, but what the way you're coaching feels more, I don't know if this is the right word, but artistic to me. It feels a little bit more that the spirit of the artist is going to sing in the way that you've described it. And so
it's really both, right? Like with all of my clients, I start with like, what are you here to do? Like, what is your project? What things is it like? What's your voice like? Like, what do you want to say? What's your, right? So like, I'm not prescribing any of that. And then it's like, let's look at what you've already got, right? And then let's start working with it to work with the craft, to up-level the craft so that that's going to then elevate the work to the absolute best version of itself. Right. And, I will say I am very, I'm very creative. I'm very artistic. I'm very imaginative, all of that kind of stuff. I'm also really, really fucking practical too. So like when I talk about this methodology, like when I'm working with a client, like I break everything down into like subcomponent steps, or like my grad students at Juilliard, same thing. It's like, I will take them through, you do this step and then you do this layer and then you add this layer and then you add this layer, right? Like, so you're not like standing at the bottom of the mountain being like, how the hell do I get up here from up there from here? Right. It's like, okay, we're going to just go this far and make sure that's got structural integrity. And then we'll do this part, right? And like, eventually that winds up accumulating into the work itself.
Yeah, I like the way you say that, because Jessica isn't like, and here's how it all is. Now go stare at a blank screen. No,
right.
It's like, you're going to go between here and here. Right. Now go stare at a blank screen and see what happens. That's not at all what it is.
Yeah.
I have a question for you. So I talk about this sometimes with my clients. There's a Madeleine L'Engle quote, and I'm probably going to butcher it, but she says something like, inspiration strikes while you're working, not before. Do you find that is true in the work you do?
Oh my God. 100%. Another thing that I come back to over and over again, besides not believing in talent, is that it's not that I don't believe in inspiration, but like, I think it's another really common misconception that inspiration is some kind of prerequisite. Right. And we all fall into it. Like I still fall into it. I'm like, oh, I have to write today and it's going to be shitty because like, I don't feel like it or what, you know what I mean? Like Eric and I have that conversation, fairly regularly, right? It's not like that it never comes up, but the reality is writing, creating of any kind is a practice. It's like you get your butt in the chair, you sit down, you do it, and you don't know at the beginning how the practice is going to turn out that day. You can sit down feeling totally uninspired and come out 2 hours later having like hit a flow state somewhere in there and like be like, oh my God, I made this amazing thing, right? You can also sit down feeling totally uninspired, continue to feel uninspired during the entire time you're writing, and come out the other end being like, oh, that was actually pretty good what I wrote, right? You don't have to, like, a flow state is great. Like, we love it. We get high off of it. But like, my husband is a deadhead, Eric. He's my writing partner. He's like a serious deadhead. And he tells this story about Jerry Garcia, which I'm probably going to butcher. Like, he would be in the other room correcting me on my like imprecise Grateful Dead lore. But there's a famous story about Jerry Garcia, who was an extraordinary guitarist, recording some, I don't know, legendary recording of some legendary Grateful Dead song, and I don't know which one. But
Eric would know. Eric would know.
He knows all of it.
Yeah.
And playing the solo and getting so angry playing and so frustrated trying to work out that solo that it ended with him like throwing his guitar down, smashing it against the wall, and storming out of the recording session. Right. And then he went back like however many days later and he listened to it, and it was like the best version of that solo of that song like ever. Like there was magic and lightning in it. And he said at that moment that he realized it doesn't matter how I feel. And that's something that Eric and I come back to.
Yeah. Yeah,
Nope.
doesn't matter if you. I mean, let's all just be very clear. We're not trying to project on everybody toxic positivity or pretend you're not going through something in a given moment.
No.
What we're talking about is don't wait for inspiration to strike. One of the things that just came up for me too, Jessica, when you said that is like, because inspiration has struck at some point in your life is almost the problem. Because at some point you felt it. It's now the thing you're like trying to change. Like it doesn't have to be there. You went to the Olympics once. You're not always going to be at the Olympics when you run that race, right? There's got to be some the day after the Olympics moment, right? And that's kind of the difficulty there. So when let's just ask this question more easily, simply. When should someone start to seek out to working with Jessica, the work that you do you think? Is it when the idea sparks? Is it, I have no idea what I'm doing with my life? I mean, you're not a therapist. I don't want to put that. Everyone go to Jessica for therapy, but I'm sure a lot of what you're doing is therapeutic. I want to be very mindful of that.
I mean, I think like I am a transformational coach and I am a mentor with my clients. I only take a couple of people at a time so that I actually have the space to have that relationship with them. I think people should come to me when they have a thing that they know they can't not do. Where it's like to not do this project at this time would be a betrayal of your artistic self, right? Like like, oh, I have an idea and that's cool and I really want to do it and I've been meaning to do it forever. Or like not like I have an idea and it's almost done, right? Not that either, but it's like any stage in the process, but it's like where the person knows they need to do this, that it's going to open up, it's going to unlock the next level of who they are as an artist. Right. And that might be also, by the way, not writing the script. It might be that the script is done and you know you want to direct it and you've never done that before. And it's like, okay, well, how do I put together a movie and actually like step into being a director? And like, I've been on however many sets in my life as an actor, but like now I'm going to step into this other piece of myself. Right. Yeah. But it's when it's time to do that.
Yes. And Jessica, the way you said that is like, this is when anyone, I think, should seek help, because when you're at the end of the thing, you're probably staunchly in your position of what it's going to be at that point. When you're at the beginning of the thing and it's not an idea yet or whatever, you're still walking down the street thinking about things. You probably don't have enough chutzpah inside of yourself to commit to even working with someone who's going to say, let's work. And this isn't to say we don't have days when we need some inspiration we get it from our coach or whatever. But I think it's important, this is I'm not in recovery, but I love this phrase that they use in recovery, which is your own best thinking got you here. And I think that like you need someone else's thinking. You need someone else there to like, it's not like you're Van Gogh painting by yourself when you're telling a story, I think, because a story is meant to be told to someone else. And so I think that's such a profound space for there to be another eyes, ears, heart in the room. Or if I was going to be super reverendy about it, I would say we enter heaven 2 by 2, right? Like that would be the other way I would probably think about this, is we need to have someone else there to figure out this space. So I have a question,
absolutely
though.
Right. Also, can I jump on that for 1 second?
Yeah,
That's so inspiring to me and great. Because I think I have so many people who start out thinking that they're supposed to be able to figure it out by themselves.
That's patriarchy, just so you know. I think that's patriarchy bullshit. I want to end toxic masculinity. Probably other things too, but that's where I play.
And capitalism. And capitalism.
Yes.
But yes, 100%. And yes, it's like white supremacist, cis hetero patriarchal capitalism.
Yes. Yeah. It's like you should figure this out on your own. No one should help you. There is no community or crew around you to do it. You shouldn't take care of your elders.
That's right.
It's all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, look, that's false when it comes to actually doing anything in the world or like being a human, but it's like extra false in the art form that we work in, because the art forms that we work in, television, theater, film, like they are by their nature collaborative art forms. Like the work isn't finished until you've had input from a whole bunch of different creators, right? So like you shouldn't be able to write a screenplay by yourself necessarily any more than like you could make a whole movie by yourself without a crew or other actors. Like we are doing this together.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's curious, so I was thinking about the fact that you also are teaching students at Juilliard and you're having people who come to you. And so I was curious about the dynamic of like when a student's like signing up for the class that they're taking with you, they're not necessarily coming to you maybe in the same way that someone who's working with you outside of. What's the dynamic there? Are you having to tug them along into you need to make your own content, or can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think people will be super curious about it. I also think it make it extra relatable about how it all works.
Yeah, I mean, I feel really lucky that like the place where I teach a group class of actors that many of whom have never written before is Juilliard. Because, and also in particular, I love the BFAs at Juilliard just as much, don't get me wrong, but I work with the graduate students. So I'm generally working with people who are, you know, pushing 30, if not, right, like who are like, have been in the world a little bit as artists. And Juilliard has such an intense culture of discipline, right? That like everybody's there, everybody who's there is really fucking serious, right? So I don't have to like bug anybody to do their homework, right? Because like that's already like if you don't do your homework at Juilliard in any class, like it's an issue, right? So like, so it's not that, right? It's not like, you know, trying to get people to pay attention if they're not paying attention. But I have a wide range of students every year in terms of their relationship to writing and in terms of their experience level with writing. Like I would say the bulk of my students are like, I'm an actor. Like I'm here spending however many hundreds of thousands of dollars on my MFA at Juilliard because I'm an actor. And like, maybe there's something I can learn about storytelling that will help me be a better actor, right? Or maybe I'm, you know, getting a skill set so that like I can understand about producing someday, right? If I hit the Jessica Chastain place or whatever, you know, the Viola Davis place, right? So there's always like a sort of those folks. In most classes, I have a couple of students who actually have written before and want to write as well as want to act, who like already know that they're interested in being hyphenates of some kind, but haven't had a whole lot of experience with it. And then I have this like magical thing that happens over the course of a year where like some of the people who are in the first category move into the second category by the end of the year with me. Right. So like they come out of my class, everyone comes out of my class having not finished, like they have to polish and rewrite and revise still, but like a fully formed full-length screenplay or play. Right. And some of them in the process of doing that are like, oh, well, when I'm showcasing in a couple of years, like I want to talk to the literary departments because I'm actually also really interested in being a writer, right? And then I'll be like, great, here's what you need to do to revise. You got a couple of years to work with this and like get it into shape before you're showing it to WME or whoever, right? But yeah, and so they come in with the dedication to the life of an artist. Like I don't have to give them that. I don't have to teach anybody like, here's how you be a serious artist. Like they're grad students at Juilliard, they're already serious artists. But I get to like explore with them, like, might you want to be a serious writer?
Yeah.
Might you want to be a serious filmmaker?
Yeah. What I hear inside of that is, oh, they come in like a little, you know, like first day of school, sheepish, even though they know they're going to commit to every assignment you give them, sheepish about the idea of being a writer. And then through being there, seeing the process, understanding that it can be done, they're suddenly empowered to like, oh, I can see myself in this way. Sometimes we call this spark in some of the communities that like, you suddenly see a strength in yourself you didn't know was there before. And so anyone who, again, this is again that like, I'm outside of that, I can never do that. I think that's a great example of when you are there, when you see it, when you are in a community, when you're with a coach and you're seeing it, how, oh, I can actually do this. It's just a really empowering space to be in, especially when you're held up by a community of people who are doing that. That brings me a question to Jessica. Do you find working one-on-one, you miss anything that you have when you're coaching in a class or you're working in a class that it's missing any kind of dynamic that you wish was there?
It's a different vibe, right? Like, and I like them both, right? Like if I had to pick one of the many things that I did, if somebody like really twisted my arm and forced me to choose, I would be a theater director. Like I haven't done it yet. Like if you ask me in a few years, I might say I would be a showrunner. Which is like just the slightly larger version of actually the same thing. I like to run a room. Like I like to hold space and I like to like figure out how to communicate with different people in different ways and like get a group energy going. Like I enjoy that part of teaching a group of students, and particularly at Juilliard, the way things are structured, it's like a company, right? It's like everybody is close with each other already and they have their own artistic dynamics. And so I get to step into that. When I'm working one-on-one with somebody, I can go really deep. And because
Right.
in my own writing life, I write with a partner, the sessions I do with people one-on-one are very generative in that way. I mean, obviously they own their own
Right.
work, and obviously any idea I throw at them, they can take or leave, but it's like being in a writer's room. Like I'll be like, what if it's
Right.
this or what if it's that? And like, we're making up a story together, which is really fun.
Yeah. Oh my God. I can see if you're watching this on YouTube, you're going to see like you sitting across from Jessica, you could see how generative it would be. Cause I'm like, yes, let's write. Like I'm ready to be a writer right now. Just so you know.
It's
So
super
I have
fun.
a question
And one thing I wanted to say too about something you were saying just a beat ago is that I also think one of the things that's really important about actors learning how to write, whether they actually want to go into it professionally or not, has to do with like being a psychologically healthy and happy artist as an actor. Because as an actor, you're working in an interpretive art form, right? I grew up playing classical music, and it's the same thing. It's like, right? It's like the structure already exists. Somebody already wrote the script. Somebody's already producing the movie or the play or whatever, and then you get plugged in to interpret that material, right? That's beautiful, right? It's like it's different from making something from scratch, but it's gorgeous. However, what it means in the professional world, of course, is that you have to be hired by the people that made the thing from scratch, right? And so I think, as we all know, that can be very difficult and heartbreaking even, and like bring up all kinds of stuff about like belonging and being included and being invited to the party or not. And like, it's a difficult position to be in, to feel like you have to get hired in order to do your art, right? And it can lead to all kinds of stuff. I think there's also a big mystique for actors around like how the work actually gets made. Like, what does a showrunner even do? Like, what does that word even mean if you haven't been on a bunch of TV sets before, right? Like, or if you haven't been on for more than 6 or 8 episodes on one show, right? Like, how does a script get written? Like, who makes it? How do things get financed? Like, and that mystery like creates this big information void that then like we project all of our own stories onto. Right? Like, oh,
God,
they don't like me. Like, oh, it's like they know how to do this big thing that I could never do. And I need to be like, I need to please them in order to be able to like join in that thing with them, whatever. And the thing about making your own work as an actor is that once you know how to do it, it like dissipates 90% of that. It's like, oh, that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
I know.
And I can just imagine having that void disappearing, having that void be gone, just gives you like, you stand up straighter. You have more confidence, clarity, how you fit into this world. You understand how you know how the sausage is made, so you're no longer like the sausage is magical. Like this is how we make the art, right? Totally. The sausage is magical is the name of this podcast episode.
Amazing. I love it. It's so good.
But I love what you just said, because I think what you just said is so true. So many actors who have not had the experience, like you said, being on 6 to 8 episodes, have no idea. They have a little bit of an idea of what a showrunner does, but there's a gap, right? And so they are fairy godmother land. Don't understand, like, want them to know me, but don't really want them to know me because I'm going to not be able to talk a big game because I don't actually know what they do. Like it's a huge cycle of a void. It's the nothing from the never ending story.
Yes.
So, right. What have your students taught you?
Oh my God, I love that question. I love that question so much. I don't even know how to answer it because it's like it's so much. I mean, here's the thing. My students are my collaborators. My clients are my collaborators, right? Like, and I try to, the tradition at Juilliard, and I think the culture of the school is actually really moving away from this, but like historically it's like the teachers are up here and the students are down there and like whatever, right? Like there's this whole like storied tradition of whatever. And like I come in on the first day and I'm like, I'm a professional artist in New York City, just like you're a professional artist in New York City. Like we're going to circle back around to each other and 6 or 8 years and like be in the same rooms. And like, you might be directing me in something and like, I might be hiring you for something, or like, maybe I'm optioning your script, like whatever, like it's actually a big artistic community. And so I learn from my students, just like I learn from every collaborator that I work with, like, right. Like we're all working with the same principles, but we all also speak different languages as artists, right? So the practice of learning how to speak somebody else's artistic language in service of the same work, ultimately is like, that stretches me in a million different directions.
What you just said. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, wait, I just want to make sure. What I just heard you say is I speak a million creative languages. Like my job is to be in front of someone and to understand the language they speak, to understand the way they talk about creativity so I can help them interpret it, put it on the page, make it into something real. Like, and that to me is like such a gift that you're excited by, the gift that you have and that you're excited to use. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Jessica, I'm sure there's a bunch of people who are listening right now and are already saying things like, okay, how do I work with her? How do I learn more? Can you tell people where to find you and learn more about what you do?
Yes, absolutely. My website is www.jessicacblank.com. There is another Jessica Blank out there who has like all the domains. She's like a graphic artist. So if you go to jessicablank.com, you'll see like cartoon animals that are really cool, but not what I do. So I'm Jessica C. Blank everywhere. So that's my website. My Instagram is Jessica C. Blank. I'm really active on Instagram, and I write about this kind of stuff regularly there. Like what I post about is how to make work in the creative life and share about my own process. Cause 80% of the time is spent for me in my career is spent making my own work, like making movies and writing television and making plays. And probably 20% is the teaching and coaching piece. So I'm sharing the lessons that I'm learning on my own journey as an artist as they relate to the journey that my clients and my students are on.
Oh, great. We will make sure we link to both of those in the show notes as well so that you can click on those right away and learn more about Jessica and follow along. It sounds like some daily inspo from your Instagram would be really great for a lot of people. Okay, I have a question that came out of clear blue sky just now for me that I want to just put to you. If you were given a microphone and said, this is my mission as an artist, and I could put it all over Times Square, and I could paint it across the sky in every city around the world, what would that say?
I'm trying to make it slogan-y.
It doesn't be cute. Doesn't be cute. Don't do it right.
Hard.
Don't be a writer.
Yeah, right. I won't be a writer.
I have a lot of gas at this point. It's a huge billboard.
My mission as a storyteller is actually to expand our capacity for empathy. Because that is what, if you look at the neuroscience of story, that is what story does to our brains automatically. Is it makes us empathize with people whose life circumstances might be vastly different from our own.
That's why they keep trying to ban all the books.
Right. And my husband just chimed in and said that's why they keep trying to ban all the books, but he's not in the headphones.
Yes, good job.
But I heard it, and he's right. He's absolutely right. So storytelling is actually a revolutionary act. Right? If you use it right, if you use it to expand people's capacity for empathy, if you use it to ask people to empathize with people that society wouldn't ordinarily ask us to empathize with. This is why representation matters, right? This is why we don't want to have only television shows about white dude cops, right? Why that's a problem, right? That if those are our only protagonists, right? Because we will empathize with, walk in the shoes of, go on the journey of the protagonist of a story that we're watching. And in doing that, we learn about the world, right? We learn about ourselves in relationship to the world, and we learn that we're connected to the rest of the world, right? So the reason why I'm a storyteller is to do my small part in helping stitch us back together. Right. And that's what I believe all storytellers do.
Beautiful. Jessica, thank you so much. I put you on the spot there. I love that so much. Thank you so much for joining me today and for really going to the heart of what the work that it is that you do and for, going on a real journey with me to get into it. I appreciate that. And I'm so glad to have you on the podcast. And I think we'll have to have you come back again someday.
Awesome.
This was a really wonderful conversation.
I love it.
Thank you.
I'm so happy to be here.